We will start, folks. Good morning, everyone. Meeting number 37. Sorry, Ms. Kusi, we're fine. Meeting number 37, the House of Commons Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates, aka the mighty OGGO. Today we have witnesses from the Parliamentary Budget Office. George Martin was like famously the fifth Beatle. I think the PBO is the 12th OGGO member, so it's wonderful to have the four of you with us. Today we have Mr. Yves Giroux, the Parliamentary Budget Officer, Carly Busby, Advisor Analyst, Albert Coe, Analyst. Welcome, Albert, I think, to your first OGGO. And welcome back, Mr. Christopher Penny, Advisor Analyst. I believe, Mr. Giroux, you have an opening statement?
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the invitation to appear before you today. We are pleased to be here to present the findings of our report entitled The Life Cycle Cost of the Canadian Surface Combatants, a Fiscal Analysis, which we were honored to prepare at the request of this committee. With me today I have the lead advisor analyst on the report, Christopher Penny, Carly Busby, and Albert Coe. Consistent with the PBO's legislated mandate, at the request of this committee, my office prepared an independent cost analysis of the Canadian Surface Combatant Program, including estimates for the development, acquisition, operations and sustainment, and disposal phases of the fleet's life cycle. Je vais conclure mes remarques.
I will continue in French. The total life cycle of the CSC program is estimated to be $306 billion, with an estimated $4.3 billion for the development phase, $80.2 billion for the acquisition phase, $219.8 billion for the operations and sustainment phase, and finally $1.7 billion for the disposal phase. Our latest estimate of $84.5 billion for the development and acquisition phases represents a 9% increase over the $77.3 billion cost estimate presented in our 2021 report. This increased cost is reflective of changes to project assumptions and timelines, including an increase in the planned weight of the vessel and a later delivery schedule. We would be pleased to respond to any questions you may have regarding this report or other PBO work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Giroux. We'll start with 6 minutes from Mrs. Kusi, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much to the PBO and its officers for being here this week on such short notice. It's truly appreciated. I think as we go into this week and next week, which is our break week, it's really a time as we consider the significance of Remembrance Day, really to think about the capacity of our armed forces and of our military. And this is really what sort of concerns me the most regarding this study, recognizing that I am new to the committee, is what these delays mean for our capacity as a nation, both to protect ourselves from a domestic standpoint, but also what we can offer the world, as we've seen most recently with the war in Ukraine. So when I'm thinking about this study, this is really my concern. It certainly gets to the point where, and as the Shadow Minister for Treasury Board, I'm always concerned about the funds and the funds being used with the greatest of care and with the most of scrutiny for the Canadian taxpayer. But it sort of gets to the point where if you need a roll of toilet paper, you need a roll of toilet paper, and you're willing to pay $10 even though you would have rather paid $5. So that's really what I'm coming here with today, is the concern with the delays for the procurement in regards to our capacity as a nation for both protecting ourselves from a domestic capacity as well as our ability to contribute to the world stage. We've heard consistently consistently from our Prime Minister that Canada is backed. I think we've seen repeatedly that this is not the case, and certainly not the case with the capacity that we have in an effort to protect ourselves as well as help the world. As well, we see a time where enlistment for the armed forces is suffering significantly. I have here an article which indicated from the Canadian press that recruitment cratered during the first year of COVID-19 as the military shuttered recruiting and training centers. The result, only 2,000 people were enrolled in 2021, less of half than what was needed. And the military is getting about half of the number of applicants it needs per month to meet the goal of adding 5,900 members this year. The shortfall is expected to exacerbate the current personnel shortage, with about 1 in 10 of the military's 100,000 positions unfilled. But I also believe that it is a result of, frankly, Canadians being hesitant to put their lives at risk for their nation without being properly equipped to do so. And as well, I'll point to other nations which have had significantly more success in doing that. In particular, the U.S., the procurement process for the Constellation FFG 62 ships, if we do a comparison of that. So I really come here today certainly concerned about the significant increase from 9% increase over the $77 billion estimate to $84 billion, acknowledging the $60 billion budget initially set in 2017 is not enough. But please, if you can enlighten the committee as far as you can, what is the fundamental reason for these delays? Because I'm always worried about the money. I'm more concerned about what this means for our protection domestically and our ability to contribute internationally at a time where the world increasingly needs it.
That's an interesting question. We looked at the impact of the delays on the cost of the program, and we find that every year of delay, roughly speaking, adds about $2.5 billion to the total cost of the acquisition phase, development and acquisition. However, the cause of the delays themselves, we don't have a clear answer to that because we focus on the costs and we rely on data that is provided to us by D&D. And we don't have a clear answer as to the causes of the delays. I think that D&D officials or the minister would be in a much better position to explain in greater detail the causes for these multiple delays.
Building upon that, based upon your assessment to obtain the costing, can you see any way that these delays could be mitigated just based upon your evaluation of the costing?
Well, one way of shortening the delays or stopping them would probably be to buy off-the-shelf ships that have already been designed and built elsewhere. So taking the same types of ships and minimizing the Canadianization or the number of adjustments to existing ship designs so that we could take something that already exists elsewhere. But that would also mean foregoing some specifications that the Royal Canadian Navy may deem necessary or essential or sometimes desirable. So that's up to the Royal Navy to decide whether that would be a feasible approach.
And in your assessment, do you believe these changes in cost are coming more from changes made by the government or necessary changes from the contractor?
And I'm afraid I'm going to have to interrupt you because you have about 5 seconds, so perhaps come to the next round or provide in writing. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Kuzmierczuk, for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you very much, Mr. Giroux, for coming here once again and for providing your testimony and your insights. When you look at the overall life cycle cost of this project, $306 billion, that number is obviously eye-watering no matter how you look at it. But at the same time, can you explain what is the actual life cycle of this project? This is not a one-time, one-year expense. This is over a period of time. Can you tell us how many years that life cycle encompasses?
So the life cycle costs are spanning a period of 65 years. So they start from when the design of the program was started, so the development phase, and these costs end when the last ship is finally disposed of, so dismantled, and with the resulting steel sent for recycling, if that's feasible at that time. So they span a very long period, and they include every cost from, as I mentioned, the development phase, which includes design and project management, of course, the acquisition, so building and purchasing the ships, their operation and maintenance over their expected lifetime of 30 years, including a midlife retrofit or refit, and disposal of the ships. So they spend a very long period of time.
And you mentioned there's a 30-year operations time frame. What goes into calculating the actual operations? Where does that number come from, the 30 years?
So it comes from the expected lifetime of the ships, which is based on D&D information as well as the lifetime of similar ships built in operation elsewhere. And the operations and maintenance costs include personnel, so the crew that will be on the ships, the fuel to propel the ships, lubricants, ammunition or munitions and arms systems, as well as the midlife refit of the ships.
And typically in the defense industry, typically when you have the lifespan, expected lifespan of a piece of equipment, does it typically, is that equipment typically retired at that lifespan, or do you normally see in defense, for example, where the lifespan is extended beyond the expected life?
Well, it's usually built with a certain lifespan in perspective, in mind. So they're built towards lasting about 30 years. But of course, depending on their usage over time, they can last longer or for a shorter period of time. And their lifespan can be extended with significant maintenance or expenditures to extend their lifespan when they're nearing the end of their useful life.
So there is even a possibility that this could be extended beyond a 65-year project life cycle time frame. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's quite possible that the ships themselves last more than 30 years if, for example, they're used less than we anticipate them to be used, or there's significantly more investment towards the end of their 30-year lifespan to extend their useful life.
Is it reasonable to say as well that if you purchase or you design a made for Canada warship, for example, that the chances of extending the life cycle is probably better than if you took a ship off the shelf that isn't made for Canadian conditions, Canadian environment? Is that a reasonable?
I wouldn't make that assumption right off the bat. I think we need to look at what alternative designs were to be used, because where they are used will matter a lot, but I don't typically think that it would make a big difference whether they're made in Canada or abroad if they're made to the same specifications.
Okay. You mentioned, for example, that the operating costs, or the cost in general, increases about $2.5 billion for every 1 year delay. Do you think that there's ways that we could the Department of Defense find ways to move the timelines up in your estimation? And are there things that could be done, additional things to keep those costs in line as well too? Do you have any recommendations in this report on both of those?
It's difficult to determine that because we don't have a clear understanding of what causes the delays. Mm-hmm. So it could be design refinements, it could be specifications that change, it could also be the shipyards that are not fully ready to build these ships and require changes to what the department has in mind. So without having a clear idea as to the causes, the root causes of the delays, it's more difficult to make recommendations as to how to avoid further delays.
Now, we've seen, for example, COVID causing delays in other projects. Is it fair to say that COVID and the pandemic and some of the issues, supply chain, labor shortages, had an impact on the delays on this project? Is it fair to say?
It's quite possible because we have taken data from D&D, and COVID delays presumably have been incorporated into the latest estimate, so it's quite possible, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, sir. Ms. Vinola, please, for 6 minutes.
Merci.
Thank you. Welcome. Thank you for being here. Before the report was even published, Alan Williams, former deputy prime minister, had said, assistant deputy minister had stated that the funding would be going, or the extra funding required would be going beyond the very amount required for the updating of all and the maintenance of all of the ships and other equipment that we have. I have two questions. What do you think of that? And two, he added that it would make no sense to not start again because Canada cannot afford the 15 ships. What do you think of this analysis? Well, I think these are concerns that are completely legitimate. We now consider that the cost of acquisitions and development will go beyond the $84 billion, and that would mean potentially making difficult decisions. For example, decisions that could be very painful regarding the acquisition of other major equipment. For example, fighter jets, the costs are not yet determined, and other equipment as well that the forces will need to purchase or renew over the next several years. And in terms of maintenance fees, in terms of the current budget, the current D&D budget, and what we know of ships, at least half of the budget would have to go towards these ships. And it would also eat up about 3/4 of the Royal Canadian Navy's budget. So if a significant amount of the money goes towards the maintenance and operations of these ships, then there's very little that will be left for other operations and so on. And so I think those concerns are very legitimate concerns. Thank you. In Quebec, we have a personality called Peter McSweeney, and something he brings up often is, do we really need them? Does Canada really need 15 surface combatants? Well, that's a question that the military strategists, public servants, and the minister would be better placed to respond to. However, Canada is the second largest country in the world, 3 oceans, and so needing ships to protect and navigate these waters is obvious. However, will we need the current makeup of the fleet? That's where the military strategists are better placed than I am to answer these questions. Thank you. If, let's say, tomorrow morning, this surface combatant program was set aside, abandoned, what would be the economic impact on the regions that depend on that for their economic development and others? Those would obviously be negative. There would obviously be negative consequences for the shipyards that are in charge of creating and building these ships. That's clear. There would also be negative impacts on Canada's military and defense capabilities. That's why if the program were to be abandoned, it would have to be replaced by something else. All right. Now, on page 3 of the report in the timeline, looking at that, ideally, when should the development stage and acquisition phase be restarted so that we can start using the new fleet at the same time as the old fleet is no longer usable? So over that 65-year period, whereabouts would it be?
In speaking with national defense officials, they've said that we would have to start a new procurement program pretty much from the time the ships enter the water. So in order to assure that there's there is no further gap.
OK.
All right. So, if I've understood correctly, in addition to the development and maintenance costs, we'll have to add development costs for the new fleet so that we can be ready with at the end of the fleet's life cycle with a new one. In principle, yes, but that would be for a different program, so it wouldn't be part of our estimates here. Thank you. Now, each ship would need how many personnel to be operational? About 200 members in total. So it depends on shifts and how the organization decides to organize that. But we estimate about 200 people. So I believe that's a good response.
Mr. Gore or Mr. Johns?
Thank you. Thank you again for being here and for the important work that you do, all of you. I was just at the Mount Arrowsmith Legion on Friday in my riding and got to be there for the flag raising of the Poppy campaign and thank the men and women that have served our military and RCMP and the veterans that were there as well. And I ran into our base commander from CFB, Nanoose, and he highlighted how important it is that they have the right equipment to do their job. And so looking at your report and just, it's 12.5% over 1 year is what I did the numbers on. That's way beyond the rate of inflation. Can you maybe explain, what are the different costs that have made it even more than what everything else is going up when you look at your analysis here?
You mentioned inflation, and inflation running at 7 or 8% in the country is obviously an important contributor in increasing the costs. But also every time you delay the program by a year, it adds costs because you have to maintain project management for an additional year. And it also means that not only is the first ship coming into service delayed, but it means that all the other ships are also delayed. And in fact, a 1 year delay in having the first ship translates into up to 4 years of delay in getting the last 10 ships. So not only is it a 1 year delay at the beginning of the period, but it means a 4 year delay for the last 10 ships, which significantly adds to the cost.
Okay. I appreciate that you cited that we have, 3 coastlines, the longest coastline in the world. And it's critical that we have the right equipment and for our men and women. And I didn't have a chance to say on record how much I appreciate their sacrifice and service to our country. And at the same time, we need to make sure that we're looking at these costs that have skyrocketed since the initial time. Now, the life cycle costs of this project continue to expand. And I think upon hearing that the latest estimate exceeds $300 billion, many Canadians are thinking about what could have been achieved, if some of that total was put towards other urgent needs like healthcare, our healthcare system, including mental health, climate action, or the housing crisis. Now, since the project's original budget was set in 2008, how much of the increased costs could have been avoided, and how might those increases have been mitigated?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer because I don't know whether the original cost was, in fact, a solid estimate at that time. But taking the assumption that it was a very solid cost estimate, then making the decision early and starting early with the development and acquisition of these ships would have certainly been a good way to avoid incurring these ever-increasing additional costs due by delays. But as I said before, the delays might have been totally justified. There may have been justified by design changes that are necessary to meet the Royal Canadian Navy's needs, or they could be things that have been deemed to be desirable as opposed to indispensable. And for these reasons, the reasons behind the delays are probably better explained by national defense.
Speaking of them, what information did D&D provide the office, your office, in terms of assisting with the report? And did D&D withhold any information? And if so, what impact did that have on your report?
No, we can say that D&D has been forthcoming with all the information that has been requested. We have been notified that there are delays to procurement specific to certain ships, and that can be detailed as needed. And there are the specifications, other than that, have not changed at this time.
Do you disagree with any of the information that they provided, or if so, why?
We don't have any disagreements because we're agnostic about the reasons. We take the data as given, and we provide a cost estimate as per our mandate.
What level of confidence do you have in this latest estimate? And if you look at this project again in a year, do you expect the cost will have increased further? I understand inflation. It's pretty hard to gauge right now where we're going, but...
We're confident that the cost is an accurate cost as of now. But if we look at this in a year from now, I'm confident that the cost will have gone up if we look at it in a year from now, especially if there are further delays, as has been the experience so far.
Can you maybe explain the difference between D&D and the PBO's cost estimates for this project?
It's hard for us to determine exactly what's the source of the difference because we don't have a very clear window as to how D&D determined their own cost estimate. And the most recent one that they released publicly is a couple of years old, so it's very difficult to determine why their cost estimate is so much lower than ours. Time is an important factor contributing to the difference, but beside that, D&D is in a good position to determine what's different between their cost estimate and ours because our methodology is very well known to them. It's pretty open and transparent, but we don't have the same window into their own methodology.
Sure. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Johns. Right on time. Mrs. Block for 5, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I echo my colleagues' comments in welcoming you here today. It's an important study, one that I understand certainly on this project has been ongoing, and I do appreciate the report that you presented last week. There's a lot of information here, a lot to try and wrap your head around when it comes to understanding the life cycle costs of our Canadian surface combatants. So you've given us a life cycle cost that is stretched over 65 years. It's my understanding that back in 2013, the Auditor General did provide a life cycle cost that was in around the $90+ billion range. And now we're looking at that having tripled. The development and acquisition phase has gone from $26 billion to $84.5. That's my understanding from what I've read. And of the 65 years, could you describe for me what is the actual development and acquisition phase? I see what you've estimated for time for the disposal phase. We know what the operational phase is. So what exactly should a standard, if there is a standard development and acquisition phase, what should that be? What's the industry standard around the world?
It's very country dependent, based on my experience. We look at the United States, usually a development phase would last between 5 and 7 years for a surface combatant. And then, of course, acquisition, it depends how long the production run is.
Okay, thank you. I do want to talk about some costs that were not included in your report. And that would have to do with the taxes and the HST. Can you explain the issue with the taxes and why did the Department of National Defense refuse to include that or not include that?
So when looking at contracts, typical Government of Canada contracts, HST or sales taxes, provincial sales taxes are always included in contracts. So the Government of Canada will pay applicable provincial sales tax, HST, GST. So there's no reason to believe that it will be different this time. But D&D made that an important point of disagreement between ourselves and their estimate. So we decided for that reason, and to ensure better comparability between the numbers that D&D has put out and will put out in the future, hopefully, and ourselves, we decided not to include provincial sales taxes, or HST, to ensure comparability for parliamentarians. But I see no obvious reasons why D&D will be exempted from sales taxes, but maybe they'll enter into agreements with provinces to exempt them from sales taxes. So for that reason, and to avoid making that an issue as opposed to the real central point of the life cycle costs of $306 billion, we decided to exclude sales taxes to ensure comparability and to avoid a side discussion that is not central to the point of the surface combatant.
Okay, thank you very much. How much time do I have left? A minute 15. I want to go back and give you the opportunity to answer the question that my colleague asked in regards to where the costs, the increase in costs, are coming from. Are they coming more from changes made by the government or necessary changes that have been made by the contractors?
We can only speculate. We've certainly had discussions with members of officials from National Defence, but I wouldn't say that we're at liberty to discuss what they've told us. I think probably National Defence is best suited to give you that answer. Thank you.
Okay, I'll cede my time.
Thank you, Mrs. Block. Mr. Baines, I believe you're up for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for joining us again here today. The Canadian Surface Combatant Project is a main component of the National Shipbuilding Strategy, and of course, it's a very important part of our marine sector here in British Columbia. Could you elaborate on the benefits of building our ships domestically to the Canadian economy?
Sure. So we talk about the costs a lot and the costs of building the ships, but the focus of the report was indeed on the cost. So we have not quantified the benefits for the Canadian economy or specific shipyards of the Canadian Surface Combatant because that was not the scope of the report. But it's clear that there are and will be benefits for the Canadian economy. Notably economic benefits through jobs and expertise. We often hear that there is an imperative to having a Canadian domestic capacity to build these ships for national security reasons, and that is also hard to quantify. But because the scope of the report was to focus on the costs and the life cycle costs, we have indeed focused on that, not directly on the economic benefits or the intangible national security benefits.
Thank you. And I think you touched on this slightly, but I note that this report does not go into international comparisons, but previous reports have made some comparisons with international examples. Some commentators have noted how difficult it can be to make accurate international cost because we just don't have the same level of insight into the costing by foreign governments. Can you speak to this challenge and what limitations there are to try to make accurate cost comparisons?
Yeah, that's a good point. In fact, when trying to have cost comparisons, usually navies around the world and national defense or defense ministries don't tend to be very open and transparent about all the costs they incur when they acquire and operate surface combatants or warships, generally speaking. There is, however, information that's available from a variety of shipyards and also from other comparable navies, notably the U.S., the United Kingdom, and Australia. And for example, we have a costing for the United States Constellation-class frigates and the Congressional Budget Office, our counterpart in the U.S., has estimated a cost of about $12.3 billion for 10 ships in 2020 dollars. So in current year dollars, in Canadian dollars, that would be about $16 to $17 billion for 10 ships. They're not identical to the surface combatants, and it's only the acquisition cost. So it does not include the life cycle cost, the disposal costs, or the development of the program, but it gives you an idea of what is available elsewhere in the world, or costs that are incurred by navies elsewhere by allies.
Okay, thank you for that. And on page 9, the report includes a section on costs that are excluded from the estimate, such as the cost of civilian personnel associated with the service combatants. Does this indicate that the salaries of the military personnel are included in the operations and sustainment estimates?
Yes, all the salaries of military personnel are included in ops and sustainment phase. Correct.
Okay, and then the report factors into the estimates several docking periods for each vessel. Has the PBO broken down the cost of the docking period?
So operations and sustainment costs, and in particular maintenance. There's 3 lines of maintenance, of course. There's onboard, alongside, and depot level. So this docking period refers to the depot level maintenance. Those costs are calculated for the entirety of its life cycle and then spread over its life, so that it can be, you can have the inflation applied to properly account for the real costs.
Okay, and Mr. Chair, do I have more time?
You have 11 seconds.
Well, again, thank you for our witnesses for providing all of that information, and I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Mr. Baines. Ms. Vanola, 2.5 minutes, please.
Well, on page 2, in terms of the context, background for your report, you state that the costs are not indexed. What would happen if they were? About approximate numbers. Well, it's difficult to give you a quick estimate on the costs if the amounts, well, I mean, they are indexed with the hypothesis that inflation will be maintained according to at the levels that our office predicted. But now, if we brought all the costs back to today's numbers in real dollars, I don't have those numbers in just off the top of my head, but what we've taken is all the costs, the current costs, the ongoing costs until the end of the program. So with inflation calculated on an average basis. Yes, that's right. What we hope we'll see. Yeah, let's hope we won't see the inflation that we had in the 80s. Earlier, Mr. Baines talked about what was included in the operations phase, for example, the salary of military personnel. But what about uniforms, food on the ships, training, all of that? Is all of that also included? Yes, these costs are included. The costs that are not included are, for example, supervision at National HQ and so on, because those costs would be incurred whether there were ships or no. And they wouldn't be considerable costs compared to other operational costs, for example, food, uniforms, even, for example, the benefits of the soldiers on the ships are included. All right. Is it possible on such a long period of time to know what the economic benefits will be of this kind of project that is the Surface Combatants Project, the direct and indirect costs, and so on?
You'll have to provide it in writing to us. Mr. Johns, for 2.5, please.
So this project is expected to be the largest expenditure in Canadian history. Now, the publicly available information about the project's gender-based analysis plus focuses on the design of the ships. Can you speak about how the economic benefits might be distributed and whether the project is likely to improve economic equity for historically disadvantaged groups?
That's not something that we have considered. We need to make assumptions as to who will be employed in the shipyards that will be building the ships, as well as the military personnel that will be on board the ships. And that would be difficult to make these assumptions in 2022 for a program that will span 65 years. So the composition of Navy personnel on board these ships, for example, we can assume it will still remain predominantly male, but beyond that, whether females will be comprising an ever-increasing part to the point where it's parity, and whether it will include other traditionally disadvantaged groups in Canadian society, it's very difficult to estimate that. I think Department of National Defense officials would be in a better position to answer that type of question, taking into account their own plan for inclusion and recruitment purposes.
Okay. Now, this project is expected to be the largest expenditure, again, in history. We talked about that. Has your office conducted an analysis of the local economic benefits that might be generated over the lifestyle of the project? Now, also, keeping in mind, when you're calculating that, are you keeping wages stagnant or at the rate of inflation? Are wages meeting the rate of inflation? Because we know our military men and women are highly underpaid, and their wages are not increasing with the rate of inflation, which is equally disturbing.
So we have made the assumption that going forward, wages will follow inflation, and inflation over such a long period is difficult to predict accurately. So it relies on hypotheses and assumptions. But regardless of what inflation is, we have made the assumption that wages will be growing at the same rate as inflation.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Barrett for 5.
Good morning. Thanks very much for your work and for taking our questions this morning. You mentioned that 3/4 of the Navy budget will be consumed by these costs going forward. What is that? And to be clear, that's the Navy budget, not the budget of the Canadian Armed Forces. And what is that budget today?
So thank you for giving me the opportunity to clarify that point. So we have estimated in-house that the Navy's budget, operations budget, is about $4.5 billion per year. And if we were to bring the CSC, the Canadian Surface Combatants Operations and Maintenance budget, in current year dollars, so the costs that will be incurred in years and decades to come, bring them back on a comparable basis, 2022 dollars, they would eat up about $3.8 billion of these 4.5. So the CSC operating budget will be a significant portion of the Navy's operating budget. However, that does not take into account the fact that the Navy's budget may very well increase over time to accommodate the increase in costs due to the CSC. But if we were to accommodate CSC's operating budget right now and make it fit within the Navy's current budget, something would have to give, obviously.
So a $3.8 billion upward adjustment would be required to maintain the status quo if the CSC is brought into online with the Navy based on those numbers?
Not necessarily, because the surface combatants are replacing existing ships. So, but I don't know off the top of my head what these current ships cost to operate and maintain on an annual basis. So it would not necessarily mean an upward adjustment of that magnitude. So there's a difference there that could need to be made up, or the Navy could make different choices with respect to other types of operations that it could decide to lower or to slow down to accommodate its CSC within the current budget.
I appreciate that you don't have that. Is that a calculation that's been completed that you have, or no.
Actually, I can speak to what's the current estimated costs for the operating costs for the Halifax class fleet. It's between $800 million and $1 billion. So when we say 3.8, that's incremental, right? It would be the difference between the two.
Okay. So, and I'm not writing these down as you say them. So that's 2.8. That would be a $2.8 billion upward adjustment that would be required.
Roughly, yes.
Okay. I'm quite sure my math teacher is very proud. When was the last time that the weights of these ships were updated? The projected weight.
So we can speak to the fact that the 2021 report had the light ship weight at 7,800 metric tons, and that has not changed in this report, so it would be 2021.
Okay. And has D&D released their life cycle projections?
No, in fact, they've never released such a life cycle cost.
Is that something that's been requested?
My understanding is that it's a requirement from Treasury Board. Treasury Board policy states that life cycle costs have to be considered when considering the acquisition of a major procurement. But to my knowledge, they've never been released. They may have been calculated, but never released.
Okay. What is the new added cost per year delay based on today's inflation? If I understand correctly, it was previously $2 billion.
Correct. So in the previous report, it was as an estimated $2.1 billion, and some adjustments for inflation included. It's now $2.5 billion, as it was quoted earlier.
Okay. And I think that actually exhausts my questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Barrett. Mr. Shawari, for 5 minutes, please.
And thank you to our witnesses for doing the work you do and how quickly you make yourself available to this committee. Thank you. As I believe I'm the last person or the last person asking the questions today, Mr. Chairman, so many numbers has been thrown out. And I'm going to kind of quickly go through them. 2008, we heard $26 billion. 2013, we heard something around $90 billion. Roughly in 2020, 2021, from D&D, we heard anywhere between $56 to $60 billion. Now we've come and we are putting a number of $306 billion. As a Canadian, especially during this time, people are asking questions like, where these numbers are coming from? And are they compatible? Does the $26 billion grew to $90 billion, drop to $56 billion, and grown up to now to $306 billion? And I mean, we throw $1 billion here and there as if they're just like, really numbers. So can you help us put into perspective of what these numbers actually mean? And on the follow-up on that, you've broken the cost, at least that's the first time I've seen the cost broken down on the development, acquisition, operation, disposal. And if you could draw a parallel between those numbers and where do they fit into this life cycle? So at least Canadians have an understanding of where these numbers are coming and how it relates to the life cycle that you have put together.
I think that's an interesting question. So our role is to help you, parliamentarians and Canadians, make sense of all these numbers by providing you with independent, nonpartisan cost estimates of proposals that are before you. And that's what we did. There are a number of numbers that have been used or quoted publicly over time, as you mentioned. The first initial estimate by D&D, then there was an Auditor General report where the Auditor General at the time looked at the life cycle costs. Then we published our own cost estimate of just the development and acquisition. And last week, we included not only development and acquisition of these ships, but also their operations, their maintenance, and finally their disposal when they're no longer suitable for use by the Navy. And that's why it can be a bit confusing. And that's also why the report that we released last week breaks down each of the 4 phases by having the development phase, which is when D&D works on the design and has a project management to determine what would be the best ships to meet their needs. Acquisition is an estimate of the cost of building and purchasing the ships. Operations and maintenance is keeping the ships at sea with the required personnel. And disposal is tearing down the ships and safely disposing of the
Thank you.
resulting
So is it
materials.
fair to say the latest estimate that we have from D&D, which is roughly around $60 billion, date back 2 years, it's equivalent to the development as well as the acquisition, which in your report is about $84 billion. So we see like almost a convergence of the D&D and the PBO as it relates to the development and acquisition. Although there's still a gap of $20 billion.
Yes, you're right that the $60 billion number that you quoted from D&D is equivalent to our $84.5 billion, but I would not qualify that as convergence. There's still a significant gap.
There's still a big gap. I want to acknowledge that. Thank you. So in your response to one of my colleagues in the committee, you mentioned that we could consider off-the-shelf. Just for clarification, these are off-the-shelf design that you're talking about, because I don't think any country has, 54 ships ready, and we're just going to say, okay. So when it comes to off-the-shelf design, can you quickly, and if we run out of time, can you make a submission around what would be the impact of that on the acquisition, which I believe building would be? And I don't think then the operation and the disposal will much change. So really, the difference, if there is any difference that comes in, is going to come on the acquisition side.
Yes, we can probably provide the committee with that type of information in writing, although operations and maintenance would be highly dependent on the size of the ships and also their use. So are they at sea for the majority of the year or for a very small minority of the time? So operations and maintenance depends to a certain extent on the design chosen, but also the actual use of the ships.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know you gave me another 10 seconds. I appreciate it.
I gave you an extra 30 seconds. We've got a couple extra minutes before we excuse our witnesses. So with the committee's indulgence, I will use Chair's prerogative and ask a couple questions, if you do not mind. First of all, thanks for appearing today. Curious, the light ship weight, which was provided, 2021, when was the last time D&D updated the LSW? Was it 2021, or are you working off a previous estimate of your own?
So when we started this latest research for this report, we requested the information from D&D regarding have there been any changes with in terms of the design, the weight, anything like that? And the answer was no, that they're still using the same planning assumptions as we had in the previous report. So that is still the 7,800 metric tons light ship weight.
Do you know what year D&D last updated the LSW then? That they're providing to you?
Certainly by 2020.
Okay.
Though I suspect it's possible they have internal figures that are just not official yet.
Has D&D ever provided to the PBO their life cycle costs?
Not the life cycle costs, no, just the development and acquisition phase costs.
I understand in the Treasury Board framework it's required, but are you aware if they have actually developed?
They certainly do have internal estimates of these.
Wonderful. And the very last question I'll ask, and we'll get you out of here on time. You base this cost, you're still basing it on, as you have previous studies, the Arleigh Burke class in the States. How much of the Constellation class, which is the newer, more up-to-date one, costing have you applied to this program?
It actually doesn't, the Constellation class doesn't play into this estimate. What we did was we took a similar approach that the Congressional Budget Office used to estimate the Constellation class. So we used the same base data they did, but that's the FREM, not the Constellation class.
Wonderful. Thank you very much again. I appreciate everything you do, and it's wonderful to see you. We'll see you back for supplementary Bs, hopefully in a couple weeks. Committee, Thursday, I understand the whips have agreed that we will not be sitting because of the fall economic statement. My understanding, Paul will try and move Thursday witnesses to our next ArriveCan meeting, which is the 17th, if I'm correct. Wonderful. Well, there's nothing else. We are adjourned. Thanks, everyone.